So, Astrid, thank you very much for this invitation to share this talk today with colleagues here. I thought I would continue your first introduction by bringing some elements from my practice in London, both as an artist, as a researcher, and as a member of CCHS. And I thought I would particularly focus on my participatory approach to research in co-production of multisensory heritage. And in a sense, because this is a short presentation, I thought I would, more than anything else, present something that hopefully can stimulate a conversation around the relationship between multisensory technologies and critical heritage studies, and more specifically, the role that art and co-design can play in preserving and disseminating culturally diverse, intangible heritage. Now, issues related to the multisensory representation of the past have been the subject of a number of papers and publications in recent years. Mixed reality and gamification for cultural heritage is one of the most recent, and it represents a useful guide to heritage specialists as well as scholars with regards to the latest innovations in the use of 3D technologies in heritage studies. So for the presentations today, I thought I would share with you some elements in the literature which I've been using recently, so that you know where some of these ideas are coming from. And so obviously we all know that the main reason for the development of these technologies is that the world is multisensory. We do experience the world with all our senses, the 5 senses, and in a multimodal way, because the senses interact with each other. And so at times, even if I smell and I see, probably that smell takes over my sight. So is in this dynamic relation between the senses, in this so-called cross-modal effect, that we come to understand an environment. Therefore, if we want to experience an environment from the past, then we need to make sure that these virtual reconstructions are multisensory. Hence, the use of computer simulation, computer-human interaction, such as virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, in heritage representations, precisely to avoid the risk of misrepresenting the past. So these are basically the main reasons for the entry of new technologies in the heritage world, as we know. We also know that in 2003, UNESCO recognized intangible heritage as a crucial element in understanding the past, and its importance in the preservation and promotion of cultural diversity and sustainable development. Now, the announcement, which was made at the turn of the new century, had important implications for those working in culturally diverse heritage, as it strengthened the case for a number of projects that aimed precisely at preserving non-material culture and artistic productions. As it was detailed in the Convention for the Safeguarding of the Intangible Cultural Heritage, and here, this is probably the one coming after. Yeah. No, it's the one before. Sorry. Okay. There must be something wrong. Anyway, the processes of globalization and social transformation, alongside the conditions they create for renewed dialogue amongst communities, also give rise, as does the phenomenon of intolerance, to grave threats of deterioration, disappearance, and destruction of the intangible cultural heritage, in particular owing to a lack of resources for safeguarding such heritage. So this is an important premises, because what happens is that UNESCO finally takes on board the importance and the fragility, how fragile such heritage is. As a result, since 2003, governmental and non-governmental organizations, as well as academic institutions in Europe and other parts of the world, have been involved with the documentation, preservation, and dissemination of different forms of cultural heritage, ranging from oral history projects, folk traditions, performing arts, just to mention a few. And in this process, digital technologies have played an important role, not only by facilitating the process of documentation, but also by helping practitioners to imagine new ways of providing access to these resources. Therefore, while it is true that digital technologies and globalization can actually pose a threat to intangible heritage, especially of culturally diverse communities, it is also, at the same time, real, the possibility of using these digital technologies in preserving and disseminating such heritage. So, while all this has been clear for many and for already more than a decade, something that still needs to be grasped fully, and probably the bill which you mentioned doesn't fully engage with it, is the role that communities take in producing, preserving, and disseminating intangible heritage. In an essay, I'm sorry, something went wrong with the slides, but that's the one I'm actually referring to here. In an essay titled "The Digital Production Gap, the Digital Divide and Web 2.0 Collide," the sociologist Shreddy suggests that regardless of the expansion in user-generated content tools, such as blogs, video sharing, and other social media sites, which have made possible for ordinary people to create and distribute online content for the public to view, there are digital voices that are still missing, especially if you look at this mass cultural production of digital content through a production lens rather than the existing consumption and participation framework. These are her words. And she used survey data of American studies and pointed out class, gender, and race-based gap amongst producers of online content, suggesting that a critical mechanism of this inequality is control of digital tools. So who's controlling digital tools? And who is producing content for these digital tools? As she says, and I quote, "Even among people who are already online, a digital production gap challenges theories that the internet creates an egalitarian public space. Instead, digital production inequality suggests that elite voices still dominate in the new digital commons." End quote. So, establishing diverse communities of practice for innovation in critical heritage requires discursive methods that move beyond simply networking and rather privilege co-creation of value as end products of knowledge exchange. Now, I have been navigating these waters for a while now. I started as a student when I was doing my PhD research on Black theatre history, accessing archives, and later as co-founder of the first archive of African, Caribbean, and Asian performing arts in the UK, Future Histories, which I co-founded in 2001. After that, as director of an arts organization, and across all these, my involvement with academic institutions has continued to take place in the form of practice-based research, which has mainly focused on archives, digital economy, digital arts, and socially engaged practice. So, what has interested me over the years, especially in the use of new technologies, has been really how to use them to establish creative forms of engagement between higher education institutions, creative industries, heritage organizations, and audiences. The point is, how can these digital technologies really help to accelerate processes of democratization in knowledge production, in arts, in society? And what is the role that digital heritage commons can really play in contemporary urban cultures? So there are a few projects which I could mention, but I thought I would really just briefly point to the last current one, Mapping Memory Roots, which is a project located at the interstices of the interdisciplinary dialogues between social sciences, urban studies, archives, and new technologies. It aims to develop new immersive, multimodal technologies, so audio, visual, olfactory, haptic, that can support the elicitation, documentation, archiving, and sharing of people's sensory and cultural embodied memories connected to a number of migrant and diasporic communities in London. The aim of this wide project is to create multisensory maps of London and developing innovative methodology for capturing memes, which is cultural memories, rooted in the rich tacit heritage of diverse communities. And this hopefully will open up a space for intercultural exchange to be potentially used in a variety of contexts, including urban design, and once developed, the technique can be applied globally. Now, the project had a first iteration, and this was done in collaboration with the Moroccan communities in London. And the collaboration led to the creation of an interactive multisensory digital artwork called Zelig Door on Goulburn Road, which I am going to present in the next couple of days at the BRST 2017 and the GPS 400 conferences. So, you know, there's lots going on at the moment. But anyway, this is the interactive installation, which you can also come and see tomorrow between 3 and 5 at the BRST conference space. And the project involved 44 intergenerational members of the Moroccan community in West London in a series of memory sessions focused on their everyday life, cultural heritage, sense of home and identity. These memories were shared in a multimodal installation that uses augmented reality and olfactory technologies to facilitate audience virtual interaction with Goulburn Road, which is then eventually represented as a living museum expressed in the form of artifacts, sensory stimulation, and narrative of citizens from the area. Now, the novelty of this research project probably lies in the interdisciplinary approach that we had when we started the project, and also an horizontally oriented approach, so that the researchers would share their position with community members and artists. Is a quite democratic way of producing knowledge. Is producing knowledge together. And inspiration comes from the critical body of work of sensorial urbanism, which was developed by architects, anthropologists, and cultural historians such as Joseph Rickwert, David Hose, and Constance Klassen. The idea is actually that by looking closer at the transmission of knowledge, we can probably capture some of that interaction and the power of that interaction in the final product. So this is how can we create democratic interactions that then create an ultimate display that reproduces such initial interaction. And while the importance of supporting autonomy, identity, and ownership in engaging with communities has been highlighted in relevant literature, research has also revealed the importance of including local civic authorities in the design of these digital interfaces. So can the heritage sector really do without other sectors? And how do we create a powerful interaction amongst all these players if we really want an inclusive representation of heritage? There should be, this is a reference which I think could be useful in terms of sustaining civic engagement to better represent perceived value and in promoting trust between civic authorities and citizens. Now, in line with this, the project also proposes to investigate appropriate ways of creating a meaningful, non-hierarchical relationship between artists, researchers, and members of the communities involved in the hyper-local. The idea is to look at community participants as living repositories of intangible heritage. And so the research methodology really has focused on finding best solutions to facilitate the flow of knowledge and data amongst researchers so that the best possible outcomes can surface beyond prefabricated cultural boundaries. For these reasons, the wider project that we intend to develop following this first pilot aims to explore how innovative techniques of tagging and image recognition software can be developed and employed to analyze the cultural material captured and stored in digital multimedia archive, and what that analysis might reveal about the transmission and interconnectedness of cultures and traditions. The idea is also to explore how new immersive technologies can actively engage culturally diverse communities and intergenerational groups in creatively rethinking about culture, identity, and experiences of migration, past and present. And finally, how collective memories of culturally diverse communities in London can offer an opportunity for young people to address issues related to direct involvement in artistic practices, culturally diverse representation of intangible heritage, and collectively designed digital interfaces. Because ultimately, it is about young people and their education and how we pass on knowledge from one sector of the society to the next. So here there are some other references which you might find useful in terms of the connection between data and place and how to involve communities in the creation of data. And a very interesting article again in Community Memories. Once again, what is the role of communities in creating material that directly relates to their everyday life, to the intangible heritage they represent, and what can we do when after collecting these memories. So, driven by these research and ethical questions, researchers have decided to embark in this transdisciplinary collaboration to devise a new design mechanism that focuses on and computationally extends the olfactory and other senses to accustom people interacting with the interfaces with the practice of evoking ancestral memories through bodily experience. So on the one hand, we have heritage that has been produced by people and continue to be transmitted in everyday practices. At the same time, we have the need to collect this information, and therefore using digital technologies and multisensory digital technologies can help in this process of collection. And then there is the reproduction. So how do we then represent this intangible heritage? Once again, by recreating multimodal displays. So this is somehow the circle that we are exploring at the moment, and which inevitably requires a variety of competencies, expertise, participants in a setup which is as equal, as open, and as porous as possible. And I would like to conclude that really community memories do not only constitute content for these maps that we want to create of London. At the moment we have Goldberg Road, and we hope to have many more. But really the idea is to use them also, these maps and these collective memories, as a way to engage people with an understanding of the value that their ordinary everyday practices have. So it's a question of value, which is really critical. Work of art as life, and life as work of art, and heritage as life, and life as heritage. And so in so doing, the idea is to stimulate the participants to take these experiences outside the granted format and look at them in new ways, and also being able to reconsider cultural exclusion from a positive point of view. So re-inclusion. Finally, the kind of analysis enabled by multisensory technologies is crucial to the understanding of human culture at a time of instability and change, such as the world is currently experiencing. Much score has been placed in recent years on cultural identity in multicultural Britain, and some might argue, following the Brexit vote, that cultural identity is now more important than ever. So leveraging technology to facilitate cultural memory in direct and meaningful way is now a necessity because of the pace of change. Cultures that have inadequate memory are doomed to repeat the errors of the past. And with movement of people around the planet in migration and refugee seeking, the likelihood of cultural memory loss and dislocation is even greater. It is therefore more important than ever in human history that effective and accurate documentation is created and made available for everyone. So I will probably have to read a translation of the bill in order for me to get a full grasp of how the Swedish cultural and heritage sector aims to engage with these challenges. But I believe that these are challenges that we all share in the world we live in. And so I thought I would share with you some of these points of reference and elements in my practice, and hopefully as a way to start a conversation together.
Yeah.